Hello, my name is Bernie Thompson, and in this video, we're going to take a look at a 2008 Chevy Cobalt. Now this Chevy Cobalt has a problem. The check engine light's on. And that's not like most of the cars you guys get. Check engine lights come on, they come in, you service it. The problem with this car is, this is the third time this car has come back to the shop. Now the reason the check engine light on is an evap leak problem. And some of these evap leak problems are easy, and some of these can really be hard to repair. I've personally looked at some of these very small leaks for a day, and they can be very difficult. Conventional equipment sometimes just doesn't produce what I want. I need a fast, accurate diagnosis. ATS has designed a tool that's revolutionary for finding leaks. We're going to put in CO2 into the evap system, and where the leak is, the CO2 will leak out of the leak site. We're going to find that area with an electronic leak detector. So this electronic leak detector is going to go off audibly, and we're going to find the area. Now, to pinpoint where the leak is, we have engineered a very specific foam where you spray the foam onto the area once we know where the leak is located, and it will be pink in color, and the foam is engineered to change color from pink to yellow at the leak site. Now what this is going to do is to actually pinpoint this leak. Now this is going to be really fast. Where this shop has been working on this car for over a month with a lot of comebacks, we're going to accurately diagnose this car in less than 20 minutes. Let's take a look at how this technology will help your shop. We're going to need to take a look under the Chevy Cobalt hood to get to the purge control and the service port. If the vehicle doesn't have a service port, we're going to need to put an adapter in. So let's see what this car has. We're going to remove this top cover so we can get into it. Now that we have access to the purge, we can see that the purge valve is brand new. This part has been replaced trying to repair this vehicle. We also can see the line that goes back to the canister, and we do not have a service port. ATS has designed a new tool that we refer to as a smart control unit. The smart control unit will allow you to control directly the purge and the vent solenoids. It's really nice because I have two wires, and normally I'm going to have to figure out which wire is power and which is control. With the smart control, you just back probe both wires. It's really simple, and you push a button, and I can close the vent or I can open the purge in the front. This will allow us to further our testing capabilities on any of these vehicles.
You're tight.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove the line that goes to the canister from the purge solenoid. So I need to release this mechanism, and we're going to pull this line off. Now we're going to put an adapter in here, and what this adapter is going to do is it's going to allow us to tee into the system. This takes place when a service port isn't present on a car. Now this port is where we're going to feed in CO2 from the ATS system. So let's go ahead and connect that.
Good. Go ahead.
This is the ATS CO2 dispensing system. If you notice, we have a high pressure CO2 cartridge that holds 90 grams. This should be good for about 4 to 6 vehicles. We have a high pressure regulator. This regulator is going to drop the high pressure CO2 from 1,000 psi to about 60 to 80. We're going to have a secondary regulator that's going to drop it down to less than 1 psi. Now the really cool thing here is notice the gauge. The gauge is colored. So when you put the system, we connect to the system, we need to know if we have a leak first thing. If it's not leaking, I don't want to waste my time and go look for a leak. If it's in the green, it's not leaking. If it's in the yellow, you have a very small leak. If you have it in the orange, it's a little larger leak. Dark orange is a large leak, and red is a gross leak. The valve is here so we can open and close and let CO2 into the system or shut it off. We'll have a quick disconnect that will enter the system at the T. So let's connect that. So we're going to simply click in, and now we're into the system. We're going to open the valve up to allow CO2 to run into the system. Now if we look at the gauge, we're in the red, and that shows a gross leak. Now the reason that this vehicle has a gross leak is because we haven't closed or plugged the vent solenoid yet. The vent solenoid is the system seal. So it closes and the system is sealed. Since it's open, the CO2 is just leaking out as a gross leak. That's what you want right now. So I always want to flow the CO2 into the system before I close the vent to make sure that it's leaking. If it starts to come up in pressure, it shows that I have a restriction. Possibly the carbon has come out of the canister and got in one of the lines and started to plug it. We shouldn't have any pressure right now. It should be free flowing, and it is. So let's shut this off, and now we need to go back to the vent solenoid, and we need to get into it so we can control it and close it so we can see if the system is leaking or not. Before we put the car into the air, we want to connect to the valves so we can control them. We're going to take the blue set of wires, and it doesn't matter which wire, either wire. As you can see, they're both the same. They're the exact same color. We just want to back probe the two wires at the solenoid. So we're going to take these wires and we're going to back probe them. Now we're going to hook up the power and ground to the battery of the vehicle so we can power our instrument. We've taken the CO2 dispensing system with the gauge and we've taken it from the top of the car and we've put it on a cart. If you raise the car up and you leave this under the hood, you won't be able to control it. So we want this on a cart. Now that we have this, we want to take the smart control system and we want to connect the other set of wires to the vent. On this Chevy Cobalt, this is the carbon canister. And this carbon canister is really easy to get to on this car, which is great. They're not all that easy. This two wires goes to the vent solenoid. The vent solenoid is in the system to close the system so I can change the pressure in the system so I can detect a leak. That's how the computer does it, the onboard computer. It uses this 3-wire sensor, which is the fuel tank pressure sensor. It sends a signal to the computer telling it what the pressure changes on the system is, and then the computer figures out whether we have a leak or not. Now, in the past, to seal this system, I've either got to pull this hose and plug this, maybe with a cap plug, or I've got to have bidirectional control to close the solenoid. The problem is not all cars support bidirectional control of solenoids. So that means I pull the hose and I plug it. The problem with that is if this valve leaks and I've got it plugged, I'll miss the problem totally. And that means you're going to get a comeback. So to solve this problem, ATS Smart Control is the way to go. This makes it real easy. I'm going to just back probe the solenoid. And once I've back probed the solenoid, now I can control it with my smart control. So we can watch it, we can put CO2 in here, and when I close it, we'll start to build pressure. That will show me that this valve is not my leak. Now is what we need to do is turn the ignition key on. This will allow power to go to both solenoids so we can control them with the ATS Smart Controller. Now that we have the ignition key on and we're attached to the solenoids, we can actually control the solenoids by turning this on and off. So now the game is going to be, we're going to start to apply pressure. So we're going to turn on our pressure to the regulator. And we're going to see that we're in the red. And we're going to turn it on. Now that we've closed it, we're building pressure. So again, when you first turn it on, you leave it open and you see if you start to build pressure without having the vent closed. That would show you have a restriction. And restrictions a lot of times will show up as a large leak code, but it's not a large leak, it's a block. As we see, we're starting to build pressure on our gauge. We're going to keep flowing this, and we're going to have to flow this for about 2 to 3 minutes of time in order to fill the system. Now that we've let this system charge for 2 to 3 minutes, we can see that the gauge has come up to its final position. And the position is in the yellow, which indicates a leak. Now that's a very small leak, and since it's right about in the middle, this is somewhere right around a 15 thousandths leak. Now with a 15 thousandths leak, smoke doesn't come out that hole very readily. That's why this shop has had this car and they've been working on it over a month as it comes back in and leaves and comes back in and leaves. We need an easier way to where we can definitely find where these leak locations are. We're going to use the CO2 leak detector and we're going to find this leak. Now that we've charged this Cobalt with CO2, we need to test it. We're going to use an electronic leak detector for that. This is the sensor, and the sensor is going to sense CO2 and the unit's going to pick it up. This is an adjustment. So this is sensitivity. We want to adjust for the CO2 in the atmosphere. So we want to just have the alarm barely making noise. When this gets CO2, it's going to go off with a loud, audible alarm. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get this on the threshold, and then we're going to test it. And what we want to do is we want to test this gas cap. You can see that the gas cap has been replaced. The shop's already tried this. But since we're here, we want to make sure that there's no leak up here at the top before we raise the car into the air. We can see that there's no leak. Now the other side of this, never remove the gas cap until you've tested it. Because once you removed it and you put it back on, you might have fixed the leak site and you didn't even realize you'd done it. So now that we know that this isn't leaking, we need to move on. Always remember, don't disturb anything. When you're getting into one of these systems, the only thing you want to do is be able to get into the system. In other words, buy a service port or buy an adapter. Once you're in, then we're going to do testing without moving, touching, or removing pieces. Now that we've checked the gas cap, now we want to check a few components under the car. So we want to get this just right to the edge of where it's going to be adjusted. And I can see the fill neck right here. So let's go up by the fill neck. And we can go around the fill neck. Now it's going to be important to go slowly. You can't just go really fast because you might go over the leak site. When this goes off, it's going to go off with a lot of volume. If you get real light pieces like the range right there, that's just because it's on the end of its sensitivity. Now I'm going to check down at the bottom here, because if this is leaking into this container, CO2 is heavier than air and it'll have a tendency to fall to the bottom of the container. So we're okay. Our light's still not on and we haven't had a loud audible. We're going to check the vent. So we might want to bend this to make it easier for us to have access. Go around the vent very slowly. Then check each component. The upper line, the connection. Then we're going to come down and we're going to check the pressure sensor. And we can see that right here, close to the pressure sensor, we have a leak. We now need to use the foam to isolate where that is. What we need to do now is to spray the area with Bullseye Leak Seeker solution. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to spray some foam in here. And it's turning yellow right back over here. You can wash these with just the water to get a better idea exactly where our leak is. You can see that the bubbles are coming up through the bottom. It almost looks like the rubber seal is bad where it goes to the sensor. What we need to do now that we've removed the unit is to take this rubber bushing off. We want it off so we can test the case of the unit. I think the bushing is what's leaking, but we don't know that until we test the integrity of the unit, okay? Now that we got the unit off, I want to take the hose and connect it here and put CO2 into this unit and spray this with leak seeker solution. We're going to connect the CO2 hose and we're going to connect it to the bottom. Now we're going to take leak seeker solution and spray the bottom. The leak is in the housing. The fuel tank pressure sensor will need to be replaced. So we'll install the new pressure sensor and put it back in, and then we're going to retest this. Now that we've installed the fuel tank pressure sensor in this unit, we've pressurized the unit with CO2, and we can see that we're in the green. This is a good indication that the car is fixed and we won't have this car come back again.